Pablo Escobar and Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán are names that define two things: limitless wealth and unrestrained violence. They weren't just drug traffickers, they were kings who waged war on nations. But when their empires collapsed, the real story began. The story of their sons. One son grew up in a paradise built on blood and chose to abandon every dirty dollar to live a life of peace. Sebastian Marroquin, the heir who rejected the crown. The other was raised inside tunnels, guns, and fear, rising to command a new generation of cartel power. Iván Archivaldo El Chapito. Guzmán, the fugitive prince behind the deadly fentanyl crisis. Two fathers, two empires, and two sons who inherited the same darkness, yet chose completely opposite destinies. Sebastian Marroquin's upbringing was a paradox. His early life was a fairy tale of grotesque proportions: pet rhinos and hippos at Hacienda Nápoles, a private zoo, and bottomless cash. But this luxury was a golden cage. He lived in isolation, his father's paranoia becoming his reality. He recalls his father instilling in him strong values inside the house. Don't steal, be honest. Values that Escobar fundamentally betrayed every time he walked out the door. The moment he truly understood his father's business was the moment his freedom vanished. When Pablo Escobar was hunted and cornered by the Colombian government in 1993, Sebastian, then Juan Pablo, was a teenager listening to the gunshots on the radio. He was 16 when he swore bloody public revenge for his father's death, famously vowing, "I will kill all those who killed my father." It was a vow born of grief and a legacy he was expected to uphold. Yet, within hours, he retracted it. The act of reconciliation. His choice to step back from the cycle of violence is the hinge point of his life after fleeing Colombia, changing his name to Sebastian Marroquin, using a phone book in Buenos Aires to choose a common Argentine surname, and struggling to find stability. He understood that revenge would only make him the next victim, the next criminal. His true moral labor began with his books, Pablo Escobar, My Father, and the documentary Sins of My Father. These were not vanity projects, they were acts of philosophical correction. Sebastian's core thesis is simple. The romanticized version of his father sold by Hollywood is a lie. The Narcos image is seductive. The reality was sheer, terrifying brutality that destroyed thousands of families, including his own. The most powerful evidence of his commitment to this new path is his direct, unprompted contact with the sons of his father's most prominent victims. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Justice Minister assassinated in 1984, and Luis Carlos Galán, liberal presidential candidate assassinated in 1989. Sebastian met them not to beg forgiveness, but to acknowledge their pain, creating a space for dialogue and reconciliation. This required immense personal courage and a wholesale rejection of the crime world's code of honor, which demands perpetuating violence, not apologizing for it. The Tour of Peace. His commitment is ongoing. As of recent reports, Sebastian is planning a Tour of Peace in Colombia, a profound 5-day journey through the sites of his father's empire, Hacienda Nápoles, the cathedral prison, but with the intention of healing, not glorifying. This is a deliberate, public effort to transform the weight of his inherited shame into a message of redemption, demonstrating that even the darkest legacy can be repurposed as a tool for peace and deterrence. He is an architect of buildings, but more importantly, an architect of memory. The line of succession. If Sebastian Marroquin is the prodigal son who turned away from crime, Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar is the loyalist who burned the fields behind him. He is the de facto oldest son actively running the family business and the most powerful of the faction known as Los Chapitos. Born into the Sinaloa cartel, he never knew a life without the protection or the expectation of the cartel. Unlike Pablo Escobar, whose power was centralized and whose family was relatively small, El Chapo had a vast dynasty. When El Chapo was finally extradited to the US in 2017, the power vacuum was fiercely contested. Iván Archivaldo, alongside his brother Jesus Alfredo, asserted control, battling rivals within the Sinaloa cartel itself, most notably the faction loyal to Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Ivan's rise has been characterized by hyper-violence, technological savvy, and a ruthless social media presence. While Escobar operated in the analog era of newspapers and radio, Iván operates in the digital age, using Instagram and TikTok, or their cartel-specific equivalents, to showcase gold-plated weapons, pet tigers, luxury cars, and armed sicarios, using fear as viral marketing. The Battle of Culiacán, 2019. His most defining act was not a drug bust, but an act of state defiance. The Battle of Culiacán in 2019. When the Mexican National Guard briefly captured his younger half-brother, Ovidio Guzmán, Iván Archivaldo unleashed a coordinated military-style attack on the city. Hundreds of heavily armed gunmen, equipped with .50 caliber machine guns, paralyzed the city, targeting military and police families. The government, fearing a bloodbath, made the unthinkable choice. They released Ovidio. This event, known as El Culiacanazo, was a global declaration. Iván Archivaldo and Los Chapitos were not merely drug traffickers. They were a military force capable of defeating the Mexican state, and their code was non-negotiable. The defining difference between the fathers and the sons is the commodity of death. Pablo Escobar trafficked cocaine, a deadly drug, yes, but one whose purity and dosage offered a small margin of survival. The violence he caused was mostly political and intercartel. The consumer death toll was secondary. Iván Archivaldo's business is fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin. It is manufactured in sophisticated, clandestine labs across Sinaloa using precursor chemicals imported directly from China. For the cartels, fentanyl is a perfect product, cheap to produce, easy to smuggle, a tiny amount is a massive payload, and unbelievably profitable. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and the Department of Justice have squarely pointed to Los Chapitos, led by Ivan Archivaldo, as the primary source of the fentanyl flooding American streets. This has transformed the nature of the criminal enterprise. Death toll. In the United States, fentanyl is the single biggest cause of overdose deaths, killing over 70,000 Americans annually. Ivan's operation, therefore, has an immediate, massive, and anonymous death toll that far eclipses Escobar's body count. The charges. The U.S. has indicted Ivan Archivaldo on multiple counts, including continuing criminal enterprise, CCE, and fentanyl importation conspiracy, with the Department of State offering a $10 million reward for his capture. These are some of the most serious drug charges in the federal book. The cruelty. U.S. prosecutors have detailed the shocking cruelty of Los Chapitos, including allegations that they tested the potency of their fentanyl on captives and fed rivals, sometimes still alive, to their pet tigers to intimidate subordinates. A new low even for cartel brutality. Iván Archivaldo has taken his father's legacy, the trafficking of illegal substances, and turbocharged it into an uncontrolled public health catastrophe that spans 2 continents. To understand the sons, we must understand the fathers' respective eras. The philosophy of the fathers. Pablo Escobar, Medellin Cartel, 1980s. Escobar was a political revolutionary who wanted legitimacy. He saw himself as a Robin Hood figure, building homes for the poor in Medellin's Barrio Pablo Escobar and seeking a seat in the Colombian Congress. His war was against the state and extradition. His money was his protection. His violence was a means to a political end. He had a top-down, authoritarian control over his operations. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, Sinaloa Cartel, 2000s to 2010. El Chapo was a master logistical genius focused purely on the bottom line. He was less interested in political power than in corruption that facilitated his business: tunnels, maritime routes, and border control. His cartel operates on a decentralized, almost franchise-like model, which allowed it to survive his capture, the inheritance, and the divergence one. View of the past. Sebastian sees his childhood as a tragedy and believes his father's actions were morally wrong. Iván sees his father's legacy as a mission he must continue. 2. Response to extradition. Sebastian fled and changed his identity to survive after Escobar was killed, even fought back violently when El Chapo was extradited, treating it as a reason to expand his power. 3. The new business. Sebastian chose a legal, peaceful life. Architecture, writing, public apologies, even took over the fentanyl trade, one of the most dangerous and deadly drug operations today. 4. Psychology. Mindset. Sebastian carries guilt and tries to make peace with the victims. Ivan seeks power, intimidation, and control through violence. It's a side-by-side comparison of how both sons inherited their father's worlds. But one broke the cycle, and the other doubled down on it. Sebastian Marroquin faces the challenge of undoing an image. He must constantly fight the media's hunger for the glamorized narco story, even going so far as to lead his own tours to show the truth. Ivan Archivaldo, conversely, faces the challenge of maintaining a throne. He must be constantly hyper-vigilant, more ruthless than his rivals, and exponentially more violent than the government that failed to contain his father. The legal hammer. For Iván Archivaldo, the legal reality is severe. The U.S. indictments are designed to use the full weight of federal law, including the CCE statute, often called the Kingpin Law. His continued evasion of justice means his future, if captured, is almost certainly a maximum security prison cell in the U.S., just like his father's. Furthermore, the charges related to fentanyl and its massive death toll give prosecutors immense leverage. He is, to the U.S. government, public enemy number 1 in the fight against opioids. Sebastian Marroquin, while having escaped criminal charges, has still endured intense legal scrutiny. He and his mother have been investigated multiple times in Argentina for money laundering, allegations he has consistently fought and largely overcome. While he escaped the drug war, he has not escaped the financial shadow of the criminal empire, showing the enduring and invasive reach of a narco legacy. The two psychologies. This comparison distills down to two different forms of damage. Iván Archivaldo suffers from the trauma of hypervigilance. His entire existence is dictated by the need for survival, dominance, and the maintenance of a lethal facade. He is forever a fugitive, a man whose life will end either in a gunfight or a prison cell. He is a product of his environment, a general in a war he was born to fight, carrying the psychological weight of command over thousands of killers. Sebastian Marroquin suffers from the trauma of moral consequence. His life is defined by trying to correct a history he did not write. He carries the emotional burden of thousands of anonymous victims and the difficulty of living a normal life under the name of the world's most hated criminal. His victory is internal. The successful construction of a life of peace and legitimacy. The aftershocks of two families, the Escobars and the Guzmans, didn't end with the men who built the empires. Their sons inherited more than blood. They inherited consequences. And what they chose to do with that inheritance changed the world in two completely different directions. Sebastian Marroquin's life became a question the world wasn't prepared to answer. Can someone born into evil choose to be good? And yet, country after country invited him to speak. Universities, NGOs, governments desperate to understand the psychology of violence. Sebastian always responded quietly, almost apologetically. Yes, but choosing good comes with a price. Threats from former cartel loyalists, public judgment from people who still blame him for his father, and the weight of a last name he never asked for. He often says the moment he forgave his father was the moment he freed himself. But that freedom became something larger, something that traveled beyond Colombia into Mexico, Brazil, El Salvador, even inner-city neighborhoods in Los Angeles and Chicago. Sebastian's message reached places where violence is a daily language, and many people in those communities believe him because he walked through a darkness they recognize. And while Sebastian tried to break cycles, Iván Archivaldo Guzmán created a new one deadlier than any dynasty before him. Fentanyl didn't just disrupt American security policy, it rewrote it. Last year, more Americans died from fentanyl than from car crashes, gun violence, and COVID-19 in some age groups combined. This wasn't a cartel problem anymore. It had become a national emergency. And behind that shift, behind that new chemical empire, stood one man, Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar. Place the two sons side by side, and the contrast feels unreal, but their lives expose a universal truth about criminal dynasties. Legacy doesn't shape destiny. Choices do. Sebastian walked away from empire and power. Ivan embraced it and multiplied it. Both lost their fathers to violence. Both were raised inside mythologies larger than life. But one used pain to heal. The other used pain to rule. Hollywood romanticized Escobar. Corridos glorified Los Chapitos. Society fed both myths, one through Netflix, one through narco-culture. And in that cultural haze, two very different men emerged. Sebastian, the reformer, Ivan, the warlord. One seeks peace, the other seeks dominance. The title, El Chapo's oldest son versus Pablo Escobar's oldest son, is more than a head-to-head comparison. It's a study in human free will set against the relentless pull of inherited fate. Pablo Escobar's legacy, through his son, Sebastian Marroquin, has been turned into a grim warning. Sebastian's life proves that a person can, however painfully, shed the skin of their past and choose the difficult, thankless path of integrity and peace. Joaquin Guzmán's legacy, through his son Iván Archivaldo, is a testament to the continuation of the cycle. Ivan's life proves that the power and wealth of the criminal empire are so vast and intoxicating that they create their own gravity, sucking the successor into an endless, self-perpetuating war that now involves a synthetic chemical of mass destruction. To continue exploring the hidden truths behind the world's most powerful figures and the legacies they leave behind, like this video, subscribe for more deep dives and join the conversation. Sebastian has done what few crime dynasty children ever do. He consciously chose to be an exile from power to save his soul. Ivan has done what the system expected. He became the monarch of misery to claim the crown. Their fathers dominated the world for a generation. Their sons show us the ultimate consequence of that dominance. One life dedicated to healing the wounds, the other dedicated to deepening the scar.